Last guest writes first question.
Yep.
So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. Do you want me to reread the question?
Please.
All right. So last guest asked, looking back at your life, what is something that at the time you thought was a hardship that has produced positive fruit for your life today? Great question. And, I'll quote my wife. She says this all the time, and she learned this from a previous hardship, is you never know when you're having a good day, right? And I've had plenty of those throughout my life, right? Where I reflect back and it was a hardship. I was in a platoon, brand new SEAL, got in a couple alcohol-related incidents, and I got tossed out of my second platoon. So I, went to the diving department and, did, whatever work there.
Was it like a purgatory punishment?
Yeah, purgatory, whatever. I was working on dive equipment until all of a sudden there was a snap deployment that came up to go to Monrovia because of the situation there in the mid-'90s. And turned out to be an awesome deployment. Came back, and then I get into a platoon with one of the best chiefs I ever worked for, which turned out to be an awesome platoon. Actually, that made me decide to stay in the Navy versus get out, go to school. I didn't know I was having a good day when I got thrown out of my platoon, but it turned out to be the best course of action for me because everything after turned out great. So
I think a lot of times we get over wrapped up in our head when the small negative happens. Mm-hmm. And it would be real easy for you to say, oh man, I got kicked out of the team, and really kind of focus on that as opposed to eating a little bit of that humble pie, sucking up your pride and going, okay, let me repent a little bit, earn my way back, and focus and keep focusing on that bigger picture as opposed to getting mired in that one little thing.
Yeah. And over my lifetime, that's happened, right? Like something happened. I thought this was like the worst thing possible, but then all of a sudden that turns into a new opportunity that I pursue. And over that time, it's changed how I look at negative things, right? So now I look at things and say, oh, this is, this is bad, but where can I find the positive, right? So that's what I do now. I just kind of like, take the hit. All right, which direction do I move forward to actually turn this into a positive thing? So, but that had to develop over time and experience.
I was going to say, where'd you learn that from? Or was there a single catalyst that you remember in your life that really kind of drove that learning lesson home? The importance of continuing to look forward.
I'll start with my story, right? When I was 15 years old, I dropped out of high school. No father. My mom was on welfare pretty much my entire life, my entire childhood. And by the time I was 15, a sophomore in high school, I was like, I have no desire for education. So I dropped out of high school, moved into an apartment with my buddies, working at Pizza Hut as a waiter. And my mom called me like 2 weeks in, and she says, hey, if I get you a ticket to go to Peru, because I had family in Peru, my father's Peruvian, but I'd never met him. But she always kept in touch with his family. So I was like, yep, absolutely. I was a rebellious kid looking for adventure. That sounded like a great ticket. So she bought me a ticket. 2 weeks later, I'm in Lima, Peru, living with my grandmother and my cousin. And
had you ever met them before?
Never. And I learned Spanish in the meantime, right? Because I was playing soccer with the kids in the barrio, and I had to learn fast, right? So, and then plus my aunt sent me to a language university in downtown Lima.
Let's take you back just a little bit, though. Yeah. Were you born in Peru or born here?
No, I was born in the United States.
And where'd you grow up?
Illinois.
And at 15 years old, were you still in Illinois?
Yep.
And what was your mom doing for work?
Working for my grandmother. She had a moving company. So she was just doing odds and ends for her. But, She didn't have a professional career at all.
What brought your mom to the States?
She grew up here.
Oh, okay.
She's white, blue eyes, blonde hair.
So was your dad here and then went back to Peru?
They met somewhere, I think, in Florida, and then he took off after me and my brother and sister were born.
Now, where do you fall in the pecking order as far as brothers and sisters?
I'm the oldest of 7.
And were you a problem kid growing up?
I wouldn't say a problem kid. I was very active, right? Just, Yeah.
When was the corner switch of, at 15 years old, I can't imagine that it was just one day, like, man, I'm done with school.
No, it was just over time, right? Like, I hated my home life. I wasn't getting satisfaction out of that, right? It was kind of a broken home. And then, I wanted something different. And then I was just going through the mundane steps of going to school every day, which didn't seem significant to me or even important. So I just said, screw it, I'm out.
Now, you mentioned playing soccer. Were you into sports?
No, not in high school. I started playing I played soccer as a kid for a couple of years, so I knew how to play. But then when I got to Peru, I started hanging out with these kids in the barrio, and, they was like, hey, let's go play soccer. So played soccer a lot. And through that, I learned a lot of Spanish. But there was the language university that I went to, there was I was the only American in that course. There was a Swiss-German girl there, and she would always invite me to her hotel. She was the au pair for a 5-star hotel downtown. And so I started hanging out with her and her European friends that would always stop by. So I thought, and she was 22, I was 15, right? So I thought that was like, wow, this is cool.
What year are we talking about?
1987.
So is there quite a bit of freedom even at 15 years old in Peru?
Totally. Yeah, I was there by myself.
You went to Peru, though, to live with your aunt and your grandmother.
My aunt just flew there from Miami. She just flew there just to get me settled in, and then she flew back to Miami. So I was there with my grandmother and my 13-year-old cousin.
But you were hanging out with a bunch of Europeans.
Yes. Yeah. So anyhow, ended up traveling a lot, went to Cusco, hit all the ruins down there, came back, and then towards the end of my time there, and it became the end of my time because of this situation, Martina invited me up to the Sky Room at the Hotel Crillon with all her friends. And we were sitting there having dinner, and by now I'm 16. I turned 16 while I was there. And by now I'm on, cloud 9, right? Like I'm hanging out with these 20-something Europeans. They're all speaking like 5 or 6 different languages. And I was very impressed by that. And then they were speaking in German, going back and forth about something, but it was about some trivial thing about American history. And all of a sudden, somebody points to me and they say, Lewis would know that. He's American. And I was the only American sitting at the table at the time. And, it's my time to shine, right? I'm sitting on cloud 9, hanging out with these, cool folks. And they asked me the question. I didn't know it. I went from feeling like this to that. So at that moment, I felt so ashamed that I couldn't answer a fucking simple question about American history. And at that moment was my watershed moment. I decided I'm going back to school. So I wrote my mom a letter. Hey, I want to come back to school. I want to finish high school, blah, blah, blah. I've had, some great experiences here. So she flew me back. So I'd spent a total of 6 months there. And I ended up going back to school and took some correspondence courses. And over time, I ended up graduating with my original class. All that is to say is that was I went from a negative, kind of experience, right, in the home life, transitioned to this, third country, where I had autonomy and was able to kind of do some discovery and kind of self-assessment over time, and then decided like, okay, education actually is important. I'm going to go pursue that. So that was one of those moments as well. It's like a transition where I had that watershed moment. And then I, graduated with my original class on time and then joined the Navy after that.
I think the cool component, though, of going to Peru and getting that experience is that anybody listening was probably thinking, as you start telling the story, you're 15 years old, you're just going to go more off the rails in a foreign country, hanging out with probably a bunch of young kids, doing more stupid young kid things.
Yep.
But it sounds like it ended up being a good group for you to be associated with, because they were at least squared away enough that you went, oh, maybe I do need to kind of dial my life in, as opposed to going even further into the over of drugs or not doing anything or getting into significant trouble, especially in a foreign country.
Right. Yeah.
Did you have any problems assimilating once you got there?
No. As soon as I got there, it was like it was a totally different environment. So I was like, this is cool. Right. So I was just taking it all in. It's a poor country. Hung out in some very poor, dilapidated areas, but like, I didn't care. Because, growing up, my mom would take us to Mexico too. So I was already used to a lot of travel and going to third world countries and whatnot. So that was just, second nature to me.
That was going to be my follow-up question. Having already experienced third world countries, lesser countries, whatever you want to refer to it as, prior to that, that wasn't anything more dramatic in the sense of making you appreciate America more.
No, it wasn't new, right? I understood. Okay, yeah, this is how Latin America is.
How does the military and the Navy in general come onto your radar?
So I'm back in high school, hanging out with my old buddies. One buddy in particular, Larry. We were smoking weed one night, and I'm getting ready to graduate high school. I'm eyeballing the local community college. Right, that was my next step. Then he takes an inhale of his weed, and he's like, "Dude, what if we joined the Navy and just disappeared and didn't tell anybody?" I was like, that's a fucking great idea, man. And I was inspired by that. I was like, all right, let's do it. So I started looking at, jobs in the Navy and whatnot. And the movie Abyss had just come out, right, with the Navy divers. And then they had the SEALs in there. But I didn't want to be a SEAL. I wanted to be a Navy diver. So I went to the recruiter's office and got picked up for a dive farer program at the time. And this rolls right into another failure.
Before I let you go down that path, first thing, pull that mic just a little bit closer to you.
Yep.
As you're a young kid and you're coming to graduation, had your buddy not mentioned disappearing and joining the Navy and, falling off the radar, so to speak, was there anything that was interesting you as far as what you were going to do as an adult?
Marine biology. I wanted to study whale communication. Yeah.
So you've always kind of had a connection to the water and the ocean, even though you were in Illinois?
Maybe. Maybe. I've never made that parallel, but potentially.
Were you a surfer or are you a surfer now?
Nope.
And didn't get into it while you were in Peru?
No. I mean, there's great surfing in Peru too. Yeah. Saw a lot of it.
So how soon after graduation were you off to boot camp?
Within months. I joined the Navy in August. So I graduated in June and I was in boot camp by August 17th.
Funny question. Did your buddy end up going with you?
He did. He went, he joined, and then within I want to say a year, he already left. He hated it so much. He faked a suicide and got kicked out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now he's a climbing guide in Moab.
Found his calling.
Yeah, found his calling, yeah.
So you knew you wanted to do a diver, but not the SEAL program?
I wasn't aware of the SEAL program. So, it was in the abyss, but I didn't really understand it. Like SEAL, I don't know what that is. So it didn't register on my radar, right? But I knew what the divers were, and I wanted to do that. So I was all fired up to do it. But
in your mind, what were you thinking as a Navy diver you would be doing before you got into it?
Maybe salvage diving. Just it was just something different and new and cool to me that just seemed cool at the time for an 18-year-old.
Was there prerequisites or any type of score you had to achieve on the ASVAB, and did you get all that?
Yeah, I was qualified on the ASVAB for sure.
Any struggles in boot camp kind of changing over to the discipline and all that?
No, No, because of my experience of just traveling all the time and being overseas, I understood, situational things and where my place was in that situation. So it wasn't a shock to me. I was like, okay, this is the game. I got to play it.
That's where I was going next. Do you think because of your experiences in traveling to Mexico, going down to Peru, did you see yourself more mature than most of your peers at 18 years old?
No, I did not. I never have. Yeah, I never saw myself as like I'm here and they're here. Never. I never done that. And I've known people who have, but that's never me.
Be interesting to if there's a way that you could go back and just watch how you interacted and see if there was just the undercurrent of a little bit more maturity than maybe some of the other guys you went to boot camp with.
Sure. Yeah.
Any issues getting through boot camp?
No.
And where was dive school at?
So dive school was here in San Diego. It's no longer here. They moved it. But when I was in A school, which was the school you go to for your rating before you go to dive school, I got in trouble.
So diver's not a rating?
No.
Well,
I think it is. It is now. ND is a rating. But back then, like the SEAL teams, it was its own thing, but you had to have a source rating first.
Got it.
And then you went to that school. So I went to STG A school, Sonar Tech, in San Diego, and then dive school was in Coronado. So it was just an easy transition. But while I was in A school, I crossed the Tijuana border during curfew hours. I got in trouble, went to captain's mess, got an NJP, which goes on your record. So when I was checking into dive school, the admin person is flipping through my record, and she was like, Seaman Cervantes, you're not eligible to go to dive school. And this was, I was so fired up to be there. Because you have an NJP on your record. That's you can't have an NJP if you want to go into a special program. So, I begged and pleaded with her. Hey, I want to talk to the XOCO. I talked to the XO. I was like, hey, can you make an exception? Sign a waiver. Like, I'll be the best diver in the Navy. Blah blah blah. Making a pitch, but it didn't work. She was like, I can't do anything for you. We have standards. We can't break those standards. You have to go to a ship for a couple of years, shake off the cobwebs and come back. And I panicked. I was like, God, how do maybe I pull off what my friend Larry did and just get out.
This is about 1990, I'm guessing?
This was 1990. Yep.
So it's peacetime.
Peacetime, yeah.
There's no war really needing you.
No. So talked to the career counselor. I was like, I'm thinking about getting out of the Navy. How can I get out? Tell me, career counselor, how can I get out of this? And that career counselor was like, look, man, just go to a ship, do your 2 years, and you can come back, right? It's not a big deal. You just, kick ass, take names, and you can come back. So eventually I went that route. Went to a ship for 2 years, actually a year and a half, and had a great time, right? The work sucked, but I made a lot of great friends, did a lot of cool things.
Were you working as a sonar tech?
Yep. And then put in for my, so I'm hanging out with my leading petty officer, LPO, and we're hanging out having beers one day, and he knows I got a hard on for going back to dive school, right? So we're sitting there drinking, and he's like, what's the big deal? Why dive school? I was like, because that's what I came in the Navy to do. And he looks at me, he's a Sioux Indian, so like 2 beers, man, his eyes were like Chinese. And he's like, well, why not SEAL? And I said, what's that? He said, well, they dive, but they're badasses. So I looked into it. I was like, all right, I'm intrigued by this. And I went to my career counselor. He opened a drawer, blew the dust off this folder. He was like, just follow the instructions in that and give me a package.
I think what's funny for me, and I'm hoping for other listeners, I've heard multiple veterans talk about this now, where you would think you're in the Navy. Even if you don't have an interest in being a SEAL, you would think that it would be something that would just be known. And it's weird to think that even after almost 2 years in, you still didn't know what they were.
Yeah, I was unsure of what they did. I think by that time I had heard it, SEAL thing. But then after I submitted my package, I was well aware, right? And then, but I was still on the ship for quite a bit of time before I got my orders. And we actually had a SEAL team do a helicopter fast rope onto our ship. And then that's where I was like, oh yeah, I want to do that. So, so I got the orders and left my ship after a year and a half.
How were you able to prepare while you were on board ship? Was it?
I just, because my ship was import most of the time. We were going out doing sea trials and stuff because it had just gone through a overhaul. So I spent most of the time on that overhaul right next to the Exxon Valdez, actually.
Did you know anybody else either on that ship or any friends you had made in the Navy who were going to be going into buds with you, or were you kind of going solo?
No, there was a couple of guys who checked on my ship who had came from buds. One guy, Jim Bebo, he came from buds and talked to him, and he was like, good luck. I think he quit. Yeah.
Once you started going down that path, I'm assuming that you're also getting influence from others who maybe had tried, didn't make it, others who didn't see the importance of it. Where I'm going with this is, were you getting the negative pushback?
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
Why are you doing this?
Yeah, you're not going to make it. Well, yeah, I mean, I got that from a lot of people. Like, dude, look at these guys. You're not going to. And I was a skinny kid, man. I wasn't by far like a big guy, just a normal average Joe. But all that is to say is like, when I got kicked out of dive school, that was the negative. If I had gone through dive school, I would have never made it to buds. It's my point, right? And so I can't imagine a world, if I had to go back and do it all over again, that I'd be a Navy diver versus a SEAL. Cannot imagine doing that. I would have hated life, knowing what I know now.
It sounds cliche, but you hear this a lot, but it is true. When one door closes, another one opens for
Absolutely.
you. You just have to have your eyes open for that other door.
You never know when you're having a good day.
You never know when you're having a good day.
Yep.
When did you check into buds?
That was 1991, probably like November, December 91.
How was that experience getting into it for you?
Oh, it was eye-opening, man. I mean, I was in my uniform, my service jacket, and I'm going to check in. I see the classes run by me, and I'm just like, wow, I am here. I made it. I got my foot in the door. This is fucking cool.
Sponsorship for this podcast comes from Brothers in Arms USA. They're a veteran-owned and operated clothing and accessories brand that's 100% American-made. Every piece tells a story of brotherhood, respect, discipline, and honor. Deeply inspired by those who serve, those who have served, and those who have paid the ultimate price serving our great country. Whether you're an outdoor enthusiast, a proud patriot, or simply somebody who values high-quality American craftsmanship, they've got something for you. Go check out brothersinarms.com, spelled out fully, brothersandarms.com, and use the promo code TRANSITION20 to get 20% off your purchase.
And at that moment, I was like, nothing is going to get in my way. That was my attitude. I'm going to make this happen because I do not want to go back to a ship. So I was very determined at that point.
Now, when you showed up to buds, are you still in your first enlistment?
Yeah.
And by signing up to attempt the training and go to SEAL training, does that automatically extend your enlistment?
No, because it was a weird thing. I was on the dive farer program, which was the thing they did in the 80s. But it was a 6-year enlistment. And I think just before I left the ship and I was no longer in the dive farer program, I worked with the admin people to break it down to a 4-year enlistment. So by the time I got to buds, I think I had a couple years left, but I had to sign a page 13 saying, if I make it through buds, I've got to sign a 3 or 4 year, 5-year extension. So I was committed. I think I can't remember, but I might have signed that even without graduating. Like, you're in here for the long term, even if you don't make it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I can't remember what was what.
going back to first going in and wanting to be a diver, were you thinking career, and then did it pivot once you got kicked out of the dive program? And kind of looking at that roller coaster of what you're looking at long-term for yourself.
At the time, I never thought career. Career wasn't even a word in my lexicon. I was just doing this just to see what happens, really.
Try this and then see where the next step goes.
Yep, exactly. I wasn't thinking career. I didn't think career until I was about 9 or 10 years in. Then I was like, okay, it's time to really consider what I'm doing here.
When you got into it, getting into buds, any issues, or did you go? Were you one of the few who was able to get through on the first try?
Oh no. I made it for the first 4 weeks of first phase, and then I had failed 2 runs, and that's the max you can fail. And I was running a timed run, 4-mile timed run in boots on the beach. And I was stressed out because it was a do or die. I had to pass this run. So I go to this kid who's a fast runner in the class, and I was like, his name was Maher. I said, hey man, can you help me pass this run? What do I need to do? So he gave me some tips, like, do some warm-up runs, like, the day before, run a mile, blah, 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 do a lot of stretching. And then he said, but just follow me. Follow me, I'll pace you. And as long as you stay on my heels, you're going to pass this run. Well, that guy didn't know his own speed, right? So, I guess we should have ran together so he could pace me, so I could follow him, so he knows my pace. So I followed him. 200 yards before the finish line, I was tapped out. I collapsed. And, they put a paper bag over my head. It was like, breathe. I was hearing like triple voices when it was one dude talking to me. It's like, hey, can you hear me? Can you hear me? But because I passed out, there was another kid in the same situation. He had to pass this run or he's out. Well, that kid just failed the run, but I passed out before finishing. So they said, okay, so during my review board, they're like, well, because you put out, we're going to roll you back. So I went back to the next class.
Now, was it merely just you weren't a natural runner, or were you dealing with some injuries too?
No, I was just not a natural. I always hated running. So the other kid had to leave, and I got to stay. But that was because I ran until I passed out. And then after that, no issue. Never had an issue. So I started with the next class, 183.
How long was your downtime in between?
I was like a month, I think. Yeah.
Really, I'm assuming started hammering running?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I worked on it.
Any other issues getting through it?
Nope.
No issues in the water? Were you kind of a natural in the water?
I was natural, yeah, because I swam all my life. I was on a swim team for like 5 years in grade school.
When did you graduate?
1989.
From
BUD/S?
SEAL training?
October of 92. August of 92. Yeah, August of 92.
Did you want a West Coast or East Coast team?
East Coast.
You wanted East Coast?
I liked San Diego, but
nobody liked San Diego.
Yeah. At the time, the teams were geographically oriented. SEAL Team 4 was geographically oriented to Latin America. So I was like, I want to go to SEAL Team 4. But they told us, like, if you want to go to a team on the East Coast, you have to put all East Coast teams. Otherwise, they're going to think that you don't care where you end up, right? So I put 4, 2, 8 as my choices, and I ended up getting 2. So.
And what was their geographic region?
Europe. Yep.
And how did that work out for you? How was it?
Awesome. I mean, I tell people even today, like the 90s and the SEAL teams at SEAL Team 2 were probably the best years of that team. Because, you got to do platoons back to back to back to back. You could do, I knew guys that were there for 13, 14 years. You will never find that in the SEAL teams today. Anybody who's been at a team longer than 5 years, they're long in the tooth, right? But you had dudes that were like 12, 15 years at a single team, right? So you get to, like my fourth or fifth platoon at the team, the most of us were on our 4th or 5th platoon, and we had 3 or 4 max new guys. So the core were on their 4th or 5th platoon, and then we just had to bring those 3 or 4 guys up to speed. Now it's totally flipped on its head, right? Nowadays, a team comes back from deployment, everybody goes away, flush and fill. Only, I would say, 20 to 30% max are the core. Everybody else is new.
What's the reasoning behind that?
It's the changes over time, right? How we do HR, how we prioritize, the sea to shore ratio and whatnot. It's all HR stuff.
Do they not, taking it forward to today, do they not like guys to stay on one team for a prolonged period?
Well, they do, and I'll give you an example because, that type of dynamic creates a dynamic for pure professionalism, right? You get to be with the same core group of people, and that's all they do day after day. So you become a professional team at that thing, right? Well, that's Dev Group. That's Delta, right? Those guys they're on that same team for years, right? That's why they're so good at what they do, right? They're not flushing and filling every 2 years, like 80% of their team. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do what they do now, right? So, and that's a known thing. Everybody knows that, right? It's part of the team dynamic is to have people who've been on there, for a long time.
It's the catch-22. One, it breeds that competency within the team, but then if it's a negative or if there is friction within the team, now you're kind of stuck with a team that...
No, because then you shit-can the negative person, and they have no problem doing that. You're causing trouble with the team dynamic here, you're out.
Did you get welcomed in right away? I mean, obviously you're the new guy, but did they take you under their wing, so to speak?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you get razzed for being a new guy, but yeah, I mean, you're taken in. But you have to have thick skin, right? People like to poke on your weak buttons, right? If you expose a weak button, people are going to push on it over and over and over and see if you crack. So that's the name of the game.
Once you got in, as far as the schools, was there a priority for you that you wanted to get to?
No, because first of all, I had no idea what I was getting into in the first place.
Just drinking from the fire hydrant?
Yeah. When I got to Buzz, I had no idea what I was getting into. I did it because, this is going to be a cool challenge. It wasn't like, for God and country, I'm going to go fight with special operations. Nothing like that. I stumbled into it, honestly.
At what point then do you decide to make it a career?
Probably towards the end of my 5.5 years at SEAL Team 2, like my first team. Coming kind of out of there, I had a great experience with my last platoon there. I worked for one of the best chiefs that I had ever worked with, and I was inspired. I was like, okay, I like this. This is cool, right? My first 2 platoons, not so much, but at that point, I was like, all right, I'm going to get out and go to school and get a real job, right? Because I came from Illinois. They have the Illinois Veterans Grant. So I always knew I can go back to Illinois and go to school for free. But then I'm sitting in dive soup school one day, and I'm seeing these instructors like come in, teach a class, but they've got all these like textbooks with them. I'm like, hey, just out of curiosity, what is it? Why are you carrying a biology textbook in here? He's like, oh, yeah, I got class and stuff. So, I'm going to school full time while doing this. I was like, oh. So that was the light bulb, right? Oh, wait a minute. You mean I can still get paid and go to school full time instead of getting out of the Navy and cutting that off and going to school in Illinois? So that was kind of the light bulb there. I was like, okay, fuck getting out. I'll just go to Buds and, be an instructor and go to school full time. That was my strategy. But I had such a great time on that last platoon at Team 2 that I completely changed that and said, fuck it, I'm just going to go to Defense Language Institute in between. And I'll go to SEAL Team 4, where I originally wanted to go, and be a fluent Spanish speaker and Portuguese speaker. So that's what I did.
That transition from 2 to 4 happened what year?
That was 98.
And how was
98.
How was that switch for you, and how were the two teams as far as their dynamics?
Oh, totally different. Totally different. Completely different dynamic, right? It's a culture. Team 2 had a very different culture, right? They were the winter warriors, right? So I did 2 winter warfare platoons there. SEAL Team 4 was all jungle warfare. So completely different culture, right? Most of them were Hispanic guys, right? Because they could speak Spanish and Portuguese and whatnot. Go down and hang out with the special operations teams of those various countries.
Getting on to 4 and seeing that culture shift, did that have any impact on just your overall feeling of staying in the Navy, staying in the teams?
No. I mean, I recognized that was it. I was like, this is different. But by then, so by that point, I was putting in an officer package. So when I went to Defense Language Institute for Portuguese, I got to go to school for 2 years. Not 2 years, for 6 months, because the course is 6 months. But they told us, like, hey, there's Monterey Peninsula College, and they'll harbor all of your credits that you complete in DLI, and they'll incorporate them into a associate's degree at Monterey Peninsula College. You just have to take whatever their core courses are. So I pursued that, did it, and at the end of 6 months of learning Portuguese, I also came out with an associate's degree. But at the same time, I also learned that there was a program called Enlisted Commissioning Program. And if you
Is that the old Seaman to Admiral program?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Seaman Admiral still exists. This
Okay.
was the ECP, Enlisted Commissioning Program. The thing was, you had to have 2 years of college knocked out, and then they will send you to college for 2 more years, and upon graduation, you get a commission. So I was like, I'm going to do that. So the whole time I'm at DLI, I'm working on this package. So when I checked into 4, I was already planning on leaving, right? So I wasn't there but 2 years max, I think, maybe even less. I checked in 99. I left in 2000. Yeah, almost a year, just over a year. But
would that officer program have mandated that you leave the teams, or would you have just transitioned into an officer position in the teams?
What it does is you. So I got picked up for it. I was actually on the. I didn't actually get picked up the first shot. I was on the on the list.
Standby list?
Standby list, right? And if somebody drops out, I was 4 down on the standby list. I got a call, and they're like, hey, do you still want to participate in the program? Apparently 4 people that were really chosen dropped out, and I was the last of the Mohicans. So, yeah, absolutely.
Now, once you got selected for that program, did it require you to come to the West Coast?
Nope. Well, I'll say, first I went to school for 2 years, got my commission, and then yes, at the time the detailer wanted you, if you're an officer on the East Coast or enlisted on the East Coast and you pick up a commission, they want you to switch coasts so you're not hanging out with your old buddies.
But the school program was satellite on the East Coast? Because you said it was Monterey?
Norfolk State University.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I went to an HBCU in Norfolk because that was the other part. I was getting ready to turn 30, but I had to finish my degree by my 31st birthday. And that's a congressional mandate to be an unrestricted line officer in the Navy. So I had to find a university that would give me a degree plan that could basically prove to the Chief of Naval Education and Training that I could graduate before my 31st birthday. All 3 universities that I applied to said, no, we can't do that. You can't get a bachelor's degree in a year and a half max. And I kept fucking running into different, I was in panic mode trying to find an avenue to get this degree plan in a year. Year and a half was my max. Found this one dude in Norfolk. He was like, why don't you just go ask for, Jake, I forget what his name is. He's over at Norfolk Naval Station. He does this for Norfolk State University. So I was like, sure. Where's his office? Found him. He looks at my stuff. I'm like, unpacking all my like, yeah, I got to get this done. He's like typing on his computer. He's just not even listening to me. Presses print on his thing, gives me a paper. It's my degree plan that proves I can graduate from Norfolk State in a year and a half. I was like, this is awesome. Submitted it. I was good to go.
How'd you enjoy school at this point in time in your life?
Oh, it was easy. It was easy. Part of that though, because Norfolk State, it's HBCU, they were giving out degrees. I'm just going to be honest. They were giving out degrees. I barely lifted a finger during my year and a half there.
You've got a lot of coffee options out there. You've got a lot of veteran and first responder-owned coffee companies as well. Trident Coffee is one of these companies, but they're different. Trident fuels your body and mind with a premium cold brew that's infused with powerful ingredients for performance, focus, and wellness. Made with organic MCT oil, lion's mane, and reishi mushrooms, this isn't just coffee. It's fuel for your brain, ensuring smooth, steady energy with no jitters and no crashes. Plus, the cocoa powder adds antioxidants, and the electrolytes keep you hydrated and balanced. Yes, they are cold brew experts, and their beans are brewed for cold brew optimization. But what does that mean for those of you who also love hot coffee like me? Their coffee tastes amazing, not bitter. So enjoy it hot or iced, mixed into your protein shake, or take it on the go. However you drink it, Trident Coffee is coffee upgraded. Get yours now at tridentcoffee.com and use the promo code TDP15 for 15% off your order. That's TDP15 for 15% off your order. Stay sharp, stay fueled, stay ready.
Barely did anything, and I graduated with summa cum laude, right? 3.87 GPA out of 4. And I barely did anything. I was like, man, everybody should be summa cum laude at this place. Like, geez.
What was your degree in?
It was like liberal arts. Yeah. Because they took most of this stuff from the Navy.
I laugh because Cal State Long Beach did a similar thing a bunch of years ago, and that's how I got my bachelor's degree. Yeah. So much of the degree was based on your experience and what you had done on the job.
Yep.
Coming out of that program, graduate, become an officer, move to the West Coast?
Yeah, so I asked, because as a new officer, at the time, you could either be a SEAL platoon commander or you can go to the SEAL delivery vehicle team and be a platoon commander there. Growing up in the teams, I wanted to do my OIC tour at a SEAL platoon, not at SDV, right? It's just kind of not what I wanted to do. So in order to ensure that, I specifically asked to go to SDV team first to do my assistant officer in charge platoon. That would guarantee me that I wouldn't have to do it again for my OIC. So that's what I chose. I asked the detailer, I was like, I want to go to Hawaii to SDV team 1 and do my first, officer tour there. So she obliged.
And how'd that go for you?
Awesome. It was awesome because I always talk shit about the SDV teams, as a young SEAL. But it was a huge learning curve. I learned a lot, did a lot. Great time. That's when the Iraq War kicked off. I was on the invasion with the Marines.
Were you in Hawaii on 9/11?
No, I was in Norfolk in 9/11 going to school. Actually, backing it up a bit, I wanted to, because I was already, before 9/11, I was in school at Norfolk State, and I'd already done the SEAL thing. So this was a moment where I realized, like, I can actually go in a different direction. I don't have to go back to the SEAL teams. I can be a Navy pilot. So that's where I was tracking at the time. I was going to be a Navy pilot. I did a backseat flight in an F-18, and that's what I was tracking to do. And then 9/11 happened. I was like, oh, nope, going back to the SEAL teams because I know what that's going to be.
And then, being out in Hawaii and, like I said, talking shit about the SDV teams, but then once you experienced it, does that change your trajectory in any way?
It totally did, because after SDV Team 1, I got orders to go to Naval Postgraduate School to get a master's degree. So I'm getting my master's, and I'm there with...
by choice or by order?
Well, I wanted to go to the special boat team to take on, to be they call it MCAD, Maritime Capable Airdroppable, right? So basically a big 11-meter rib with a parachute on it drops out of a C-17 and then you come out with it so you can, go to do missions anywhere. I wanted to be a MCAD commander after SCV Team 1, because at that point I was like, okay, I want to hit every capability area of NSW, right? Naval Special Warfare. So, yep, I was a SEAL. Now I'm SDVer. Now I want to go do the special boat team stuff. But the detailer at the time was like, no, we're not sending SEALs right now. How about NPS? So she threw it at me.
Is the special boat teams, is that another component like the SDV teams where it's its own complete, almost separate entity?
Yep. We have several special boat teams, and they support the SEAL teams. But now, they have very specialized boats. They do their own missions now. So, So she said, how about NPS? So that was an easy button for me because that was already on my radar. So I was like, yep, absolutely. I'll do that.
How did you like the transition going from enlisted to officer?
Oh, I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Did you find that the transition for you personally was easy? And obviously you can't go back and take away your enlisted time, but do you think it made you a better officer having been enlisted?
I think so, yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I'd worked for shitty officers. I worked for great officers. And I knew what those attributes were that I liked or disliked. So I worked on focusing on those attributes.
What years were you at your master's program?
That was 2000. I checked in 2006 and graduated December of 2007.
Now, did you feel like you were, quote unquote, missing anything? Because that's pretty much the height, I would say, 06, 07, 08. Wouldn't that be the height of team activity in the desert?
It was the height, but no, I didn't. I'd done 3 deployments at SDV Team 1, right? So I did a deployment to Qatar leading up to the war. Then I went on the invasion with the Marines. And then my last deployment there was to Fallujah in 2005 for 6 months, where we did a lot of shit.
It almost kind of sounds like you were looking forward to the break.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I needed a break by then. So went to the NPS. Then was able to convince my detailer that I need to stay for 6 more months to go, because Defense Language Institute and Naval Postgraduate School are at the same kind of place in Monterey. So I convinced my detailer to write me orders for 6 more months after I graduated NPS to go back to DLI for French. So I'd been to DLI twice, 10 years apart, one for Portuguese, one for French.
In your mind, by getting the French component, and I'm not saying this negatively, what angle are you trying to work to get these feathers in your hat? Or is it just personal?
That to me was personal. Like, my friend Martina that I mentioned, living in Peru, she spoke 5 languages. And when I met her and understood that about her, I was very inspired. I was like, that is cool. I want to get to that point one day. So it was always my objective to get as many languages under my belt as possible.
Do you have a family yet at this point? Married, kids?
Yeah. At DLI, yes. Yeah.
How is all of this starting to impact your family, or is it having an impact?
Oh, it was having an impact for sure.
What was the impact on you and your decisions for the remainder of your career now that family was involved?
Ask me that again.
So where I'm going with this is you had a lot of opportunities.
Yep.
Started out East Coast, came West Coast, got to go to Hawaii, master's degree. Now that there's a family component in it, how is that driving your decisions as far as what the remainder of your career is going to be?
Well, my wife at the time was an East Coast girl, right? So she insisted on being on the East Coast. So I always compromised there. I always wanted to come back to San Diego, but her family's in Virginia Beach. So I always said, okay, Roger that. We'll go that route. So I went back to. So after NPS, we went back to Virginia Beach. But remember, I said I wanted to do my OIC tour at a SEAL platoon. So while I'm at NPS, there was a guy that was senior to me, a SEAL, Tom Donovan, and I asked him because I respected his opinion. And I said, hey, look, there's a new team stood up, right? They stood up 2 new teams, now they're called Special Reconnaissance Team 1 and 2, one on each coast. They were a support activity. So it's basically like a hodgepodge of intel collectors and analysts, all roped up into one with SEALs peppered in, cross-functional teams. And that to me sounded exciting, right? And the other component of that is I came from SDB Team 1, which had a huge learning curve for me. The learning curve was like that. And I wanted to keep that up, right? I all of a sudden started feeling like, I want to go back to another SEAL platoon. I've done 6 of those already, right? Because I know what the game is going to be, right? You know, just the training and whatnot. But there was this new opportunity with the learning curve involved. So I asked Tom, I was like, hey man, like standing up these new teams, cross-functional teams, I'm kind of thinking I want to do that for my OIC tour. And he said, you know, dude, you definitely want to do your OIC tour at a SEAL team for many reasons, right? That was like the core competency for an officer, you know, and that was a department head tour, right? And I understood why he said that, but I didn't take his advice. I said, you know, I'm going to keep up with this learning curve because this looks interesting. So I went against, general wisdom and went to the SRT-2, which is on the East Coast. And also satisfied my wife's, my then wife's desire to be on the East Coast. And I knew I was going to be deploying anyway. So, I wanted to give her, what she wanted because I was going to be gone anyway.
Now, as far as senior leadership, were they pushing for you to go to this new team or go to an actual SEAL team?
No, it doesn't work like that. If you let the leaders decide for you, they'll decide for you.
Got
right?
it.
But I always knew that you can kind of maneuver around the detailers, right? If you start calling ahead to the different teams and saying, hey, this is Lewis, blah, 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 Lieutenant Cervantes, I'd love to come to your command. Do you have an opening in, say, April, right? And if they say, yeah, man, we've got we need 2 lieutenants by that time, absolutely, right? And then I call a detailer. It's like, hey, I just called SEAL Team 2. They need 2 lieutenants by this time. I'm one of them, right? So I just did their job for them.
Got it.
It makes it easier for them as well. So you can either, and there's 2 types of people in the Navy, right? Like those that make it happen or those that let the shit happen to them is effectively it, right? If you don't take control of your career, someone else is going to drive it for you because there's detailers and they write orders. And if you don't pipe up, they're just going to send you where they need you.
When you got to I'm sorry, what was the name of those teams, the new stand-up teams?
The Special Reconnaissance teams.
Special Reconnaissance. How was that for you? Did you find that learning curve you were chasing was still there?
Absolutely, yeah. It was insane.
Now, are you learning at that point, you're learning more about the intel side of things?
Yes. Yep. And then the nitty-gritty details of what the analysts do, what they look at, how they can manipulate the data, how they can sort through data, all kinds of things. Cyber, defensive, offensive cyber stuff they can pull off. It's crazy.
How many years into your career at this point are you?
Over 20. Over 20.
Are you starting to look at the puzzle that you've put together for yourself and start to think about where you can market this outside the Navy at this point?
Not at the time. I did 4 years at SRT-2, and then I wanted a break from all of that. So here I'm 23 years in. So I asked for a shore duty position in DC based on a buddy's recommendation. And I got orders to the Washington Navy Yard to do program management, right? Defense acquisitions, which is a hot topic today. And I ended up there for 4 years. And at the time, I wasn't sure if I was going to stay in or get out, right? Because now I'm up for my executive officer tour. I was screened for XO positively, and but I was dating a girl at the time and recently divorced, dating a girl. And I was like, God, do I get out and just stay here in DC and do something different? Or I stay in and make 05, and maybe make 06. But at the time the wars were dying down and I was tired of going, went to Iraq 3 times, spent a year in Afghanistan. I was done with all that stuff. I was like, I wanted something different. It just got old. So, but it was a tough decision for me. And this hits on the transition door big time, because that was hard for me, right? My entire identity was tied up in being a SEAL, right? And the idea of like getting out was a very scary one. And I had no idea what I was going to end up doing. So to kind of buffer that, while I was in DC at that command at the Navy Yard, I started going to Johns Hopkins for my MBA. And then I knocked that out in the next 3 years.
Is all this driven by you and that going back to that 15, 16-year-old kid wanting to push yourself to that level?
Yep. Yeah.
So, and I don't mean this in a negative way. No mentor in your ear going, hey, you should now go get your MBA.
No.
It was all driven by yourself.
No, this is all me. No. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have a lot of mentors growing up, and even, in the Navy. I had people telling me, you should do this, you should do that. But a lot of times I'd be like, fuck you. That's a dumb idea, right? Or it's not desirable by my standard. So yeah, that's personal drive. So yeah, I got my MBA at Hopkins.
Are you able to go through the MBA program out of your own dime or through the government's dime?
So partial, but part of both. Yeah.
Because I'm a big proponent of anybody who's in a position for their organization to put money towards education.
Absolutely.
Use it.
I agree.
You're a fool if it's available to you and you're not taking advantage of it.
Yep. So, yeah. And then I was like, okay, well, at that point I decided, okay, I had to make a decision. I'm going to get out. Because I had stayed in, I would have put on 05. And this was my calculus, right? I'd have put on 05, but then you don't pin it on and get paid for it until a year and a half after you get selected for it, right? And then you have to do 3 years time and grade before you can retire as an 05. So I was looking at 5 years of trajectory there. I would be 50 years old with an MBA that's already 5 years stale, right? That was going to be useless. So what's the point of that? The other piece of that is I didn't want to go back and, as an 05, back to a jock in Iraq or Afghanistan and just hang out there. It was just like the most undesirable thought in my head. So I made the very hard choice of getting out, rolling the dice and see where it takes me. So I went full bore on finding a job outside of the Navy. And I started interviewing at places I didn't even care to work for. But the reason was I wanted to see what kind of questions they would ask me. I wanted to practice the interview, right? So I would do interview after interview after interview. Places I had no intention of working, but I, put on the face and pretended.
Did you start this process while you were still in the Navy?
Yeah. Yeah, while I was at the Washington Navy Yard. So I was in the middle of refining my resume and going to school and, hitting interviews and, kind of doing some deep, deep digging on what the hell I want to do. And so then I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go from elite to elite.
Your body is built for more energy, more focus, more strength. But if you're feeling sluggish, unmotivated, or mentally drained, it's time to make a change. At Human Performance TRT, science meets convenience. Their hormone replacement therapy, weight loss programs, and mental health solutions are all designed to help you feel and perform at your best without ever leaving home. They offer medical-grade hormone optimization, weight loss support with personalized health coaching, and ketamine therapy for depression, anxiety, and trauma, all guided by qualified mental health professionals. HPTRT is veteran and first responder owned, and they make it simple to optimize your health. There's no locked-in contracts, and if you're already on a hormone program, switching is easy. There's no extra test if your blood work is under 6 months old. Ready to take back your edge? Go to hptrt.com and use the promo code TDP for 30% off. That's hptrt.com and use the promo code TDP for 30% off your entire program. Stop waiting. Your peak performance starts now.
So I started interviewing at like Google, McKinsey, BCG, Goldman Sachs. I got picked up at Goldman. So
what kind of positions were you interviewing for, even the ones that you weren't interested in?
Just, fuck, man. It's project manager, I don't know, ops analyst, all kinds, man.
Was there ever a position that you ran across that you were actually interested in, and then you found out that you were missing a key component?
Sure. Oh yeah. Yeah. Like SQL, right?
You're not a SQL guy?
No. So when I interviewed at Facebook, that was one of their first questions. I was like, no, but I can learn it. And I even said, I was like, look, no, I don't know SQL, but like, I bet you I can learn in a couple months. So, I think that ruined the interview right there because I was being cocky. But yeah, I got picked up at Goldman initially for an internship. They had a veterans integration program, veteran integration program, VIP, and I got picked up for that. They only chose 15 that year for the country, out of the nation, and I don't know if they still do it.
Is that New York or DC?
Well, you start in New York, you do like a couple weeks in New York, and then the rest of the internship is either in New York or wherever Goldman offices are. The team that picked me was a small team of it's a stable value fund. It's a $50 billion fund up in Burlington, Vermont. So that team chose me. I said yes. So I did 2 weeks in New York and then the rest of the internship in Burlington. And then afterwards, they basically start having you, if they don't have headcount to place you and where you currently are for your internship, they start encouraging you to apply at other places where they do have the account. So they work to get you in the door someplace at Goldman. So I interviewed a couple spots and then
and in that intern program, they're preparing you for what position?
I think they're just preparing you for the culture at Goldman.
Got it.
They're not really preparing you for a position.
Got it.
They're just kind of exposing you to the corporate culture, and then they give you some flexibility to kind of look around and see where you feel like you fit best. So, and they're determined to get you positioned, right? So I interviewed at a real estate place down in Texas, Irvine, Texas, and a couple other spots, but I got a call back to go to Salt Lake City. To work in ops in their product data quality team. And I spent like 9 months there and I hated it.
How was that initial transition? Maybe, again, you went from the Navy straight into that intern program.
Yep.
So you might not have had a lot of downtime, but was there a point where you actually had a rationalization or a rational moment of, man, I missed the Navy, or what am I doing here?
I never missed Navy. And people ask me that all the time. Do you miss the teams? Like I was in the SEAL teams for 25 years. I don't miss it, right? I got to do everything I wanted to do. Everything that a SEAL could possibly want to do. With the exception of going to Dev Group. I had when I was putting in my package to get a commission, I also had two other decision points, right? So I said, if this doesn't get picked up, if I don't get picked up for this program, what is my second choice? And that second choice, I already had a package put together for that too, and that was to be a helicopter pilot in the Army. Army was taking enlisted folks. You go to the warrant officer school, and then you go to pilot school. I already knew a couple of SEALs who already did it. So I leveraged their packages and then created my own to submit. So if I didn't get picked up for the officer program, I was going to submit to be an Army helicopter pilot. I just wanted to do anything but be a SEAL. I was kind of like, I
been there, done there, got the T-shirt.
Yeah. And then my third choice, go to screen for Dev Group and go to Dev Group. So, but my number one choice happened.
Now, within the teams, you make officer. Does that now negate your ability to put in for Dev Group as an officer?
No, it doesn't. You can go as an officer, but I had other aspirations by that point.
And my question for when I asked if you missed the Navy, it wasn't necessarily the teams. What I was thinking of is you basically grew up in that structured organization of the military.
Yep.
Now you're out and you're a civilian. You're operating in an environment that's completely different than what you're used to from the military and the teams. That's where I was getting at of, man, as much as I may not have wanted to go back for another platoon and another trip to the desert.
Yeah.
I liked the structure of what the military gave me, is where I was kind of thinking.
Yeah, but I'm also realistic enough to know that, okay, those days are over, right? And I can kind of self-coach myself, like, that's not going to happen again, so we've got to move forward and press on because this is the new reality, right? Like, we can't go back there because that's done. That chapter's done. So, I'm hyper aware of that stuff on the front. So no, I didn't struggle with that at all.
For that program with Goldman, if somebody's listening to this and they're still in, was the MBA or a master's a requirement to get into that intern program?
No, but it definitely helped. I mean, I remember in the interview, like, they were like, Johns Hopkins, it couldn't have been easy. Right. And that was the reason why I got the MBA, because I already had a master's, but I needed something to kind of back it up. And that was fresh also, so I could start interviewing at these other places and get my foot in the door.
Did Johns Hopkins have a good alumni network for you? And did you pull upon it at all?
No, I did not.
Because that's one of the things.
And I was choosing between 3 different schools: George Washington, Johns Hopkins, and what's the other one? Georgetown. And my ultimate, and they weren't even, Hopkins wasn't accredited for the MBA program yet. They are now. But the only reason why I chose Johns Hopkins is because of the name recognition. Because I knew if it was on my resume, it's got to stand out, right? GW, if I'm working for a European company, I don't know if they'd recognize GW, maybe, but.
Well, that's a huge point for a lot of people to think about. If you're going to get your bachelor's degree in, I'll just say history,
yeah,
the school it comes from really doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
But in certain circumstances, in certain environments, the school matters more than what the degree is.
Absolutely.
And you've got to be aware of where you're trying to get to. And it goes back to that, is it worth the investment in your time and your money to get that name of that degree for what you want to do long term?
Sure. And the other thing about MBA programs is the network that you develop while you're there.
So you ended up in Seattle,
Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City, I'm sorry, didn't dig it.
No, I hated it. I hated the job. I loathed walking to work every day. Hated it. So I just bided my time until, the next thing came along. And then that's when I started getting serious with my current wife, and was talking to her a bunch. And my kids were still in Virginia Beach as well. So, I wanted to make my way back to Virginia Beach to be closer to them, but I needed to get that, ticket on my resume. And my goal was to be there for a year, but I was like, I did 2.5 months of the internship. By month 9, I was like, okay, this is enough. I am done. So I quit.
Was it the job or the culture at that organization?
Both. Yeah, the culture. They at Goldman they would talk about the Goldman culture. We have a culture here, but I didn't smell it. I didn't see it. I didn't feel it anywhere when I looked around. The SEAL teams, you can cut through that culture with a chainsaw, right? So I thought it was a lot of bullshit, talking out of both sides of your mouth kind of stuff. And then the experience was it was awful.
How many years out are you at this point?
Oh, dude, I was like months out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then at this point, have you seen enough of the corporate world to where you can start focusing your attention? Like, okay, this is the spot I want to aim for.
No, I because I was in operations at Salt Lake City. That's their largest, one of their largest buildings or footprints in the U.S. is Salt Lake City because that's where all their ops are. But at that point, I was like, maybe I need to be on the client-facing side. So I put out my resume, reached out to some friends, and got an interview at Bank of America in the commercial banking space, and got picked up. And as it turns out, it was in Norfolk, Virginia, which is where my kids are and where my current wife was living at the time.
Is the underlying interest in finance there for you?
No, zero. No, I just wanted to, it felt like a natural thing because I just finished my MBA. That's where I should go. And then the program at Bank of America, they have it's called the Relationship Manager Development Program, RMDP, and they train you for a year. 6 months of credit training, 6 months of treasury and sales training, which was like an extension of my MBA, which was awesome, right? No goals. I just go to the training. And then got done with the training, and then I get handed like 16 different commercial clients that I'm working. But that experience was like, as the relationship manager, you're the quarterback of the team. But my team is spread out between New York, Richmond, and Charlotte, which are all non-responsive. And I'm trying to, get a hold of these people because they have to action shit for my client. And then I'm telling my boss, like, hey, I'm not getting any response from the fucking Charlotte team. What the hell? She's like, you have to be the squeaky wheel. She puts it back on me. Okay, I am being the squeaky wheel. So after about 6 months of that, I told her to go fuck herself. Quit.
In my mind, I'm thinking that, and not necessarily because you were in the teams, because I think anybody who's been in a military position or a first responder position, don't give this control to me, because if you want me to fix this problem, I will fix this problem.
Yeah.
It's not going to be politically correct and people aren't going to be happy, but I will fix this problem.
Yeah. Yep. Reminds me of our current president. Yep. That's true.
So did you end up leaving Bank of America or just leaving that program?
No, I left Bank of America. I was done. I submitted my letter of resignation and never looked back. Then I was kind of...
Did you have anything lined up? Or?
Nope. That was 6 months before my wife and I moved from Virginia Beach to San Diego. So at that point, I was pretty much retired, living in Virginia Beach with my wife. And we had already decided we're going to move to San Diego. So she and I had flown out here and blah, blah, blah. Flew the kids out the next year. So we had planned on moving out here. So this was kind of part of it. And at that point, I was like, I'm going to focus all my time on applying for jobs in San Diego. So I jumped on USA Jobs and applied for several government jobs. And within 2 weeks, I got a call from Naval Special Warfare Group 1. And I was like, yep.
It's like the mafia.
I'll take it. Yep. I'll take it.
Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in.
Yeah. So I had a job in hand, and my wife and I were excited because we can execute our plan to go to San Diego.
So is that where you're still at today?
Yeah. Oh, well, no, then I did 3 years there, and then the echelon above, which is the Warcom, the headquarters, I got a call from there from my current boss, like, hey, what do I got to do to get you out here? And I was, what's the job? He was like, science and technology manager. I had no idea what that was. I was like, sure, that sounds interesting.
Back on the corporate side? Or?
No, it's at the headquarters.
Oh, the next level up.
Yeah, the next echelon up.
What is the grind? It's not just a routine, but the decision we make to wake up, give everything we've got, then find a way to go further. Grind, spelled GRND, is more than a brand. It's a movement, an emotion we all feel connected to as we work daily to pursue our goals and support each other. Founded by a former Army Ranger, Grind Activewear has a clear mission: to give 100% and then some more, in sport, fitness, and in life. Functional, high-quality performance wear that's rooted in American culture, because you demand gear that outworks the rest. Whether you're on the field, in the gym, or building your own lane, Grind is for those who refuse to settle. Go check out thegrindcollective.com and tap into something bigger than clothing. And while you're there, use the promo code TRANSITION15 to get 15% off your purchase. You're likely already on the grind. Maybe you just don't realize it yet, but the grind continues.
So I took him on it, even though I had no idea what the job was, but I was like, how hard can it be? So that's what I do now.
And what's that entail?
It's basically like you cherry pick through various defense industry partners, and you throw them federal research and development money to develop tech that we can implement in our weapon systems.
How much longer do you think you'll be working in your plan?
Working there, probably 5 more years.
Okay.
If I got 5 more years, and then, And that's, it's funny that you ask, like, it's always at the 5-year mark where when I see at the end of that 5 years, there's got to be a change. There's got to be something different. That's where I start planning, right? That 5 years, because it goes by quick, as you know. And that's where I am now, right? So I'm teeing up my second transition into semi-retirement, right? Doing what I want to do, but also making money.
Is there anything that's on your radar right now that you really want to do?
Yeah. A buddy of mine's finishing his master's. So it's funny enough, I blew through all but 5 months of my GI Bill, 5.5 months. But there's this new thing where I can get 12 more months added to my GI Bill, basically giving me runway for another master's degree. So there's this program at PNLU.
Why not doctorate?
Well, I thought about that for linguistics, for sure. But it's such a long road, and I don't know if I have the patience for it at this point. And I only have 18 months of GI Bill left, so I was thinking maybe like an integrative wellness program and do coaching. But what kind of coaching, health and wellness, I'm not sure. I haven't kind of cracked that nut yet. But I'm on that kind of planning route for the next transition, for sure.
2 avenues I want to go. One, the personal side. What's kept you grounded through all your time in and since you've been out? Like, what is the personal side that finds your center? Because you strike me as somebody who's very mellow. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't just initially meeting you, wouldn't think 20 plus years in the military, even in the SEAL teams, corporate America at the highest level. What kind of brings you back to center?
That's a good question. I would say self-awareness. I'm very self-aware, very aware of reality, right? I don't delude myself into thinking, ridiculous, postulates or, theories. Just more, I see the world as it is, not as I want it to be.
And when we first talked on the phone, your son's now in the Navy.
He is.
What's his trajectory? What's he looking at doing?
He's in A school right now to be a builder, BU. So he'll be a CB, which I'm very excited about. Because he's, I spent almost 27 years in the Navy. And my skill set is one that's, the only way I can get paid for it is by being a mercenary, right? Planning to kill people, which isn't very useful right in the outside. But I'm excited for him because he can build houses, right? And he's getting that skill set, and and I know he'll stay in for 20 plus years. And after 20 years, he can name his price at that point.
That's one of the huge things that I would say, not that a lot of people don't think about, but they come into these careers and they think about the fun things they can do while they're in the careers, but they don't think about what's the transition and what's the carryover. You could bang doors for 20 years and go after, terrorists, but there's not a huge market for that on the civilian side. No. So and
that's the hardest thing for SEALs when they get out. Right. I think you alluded to it, but when you hang up the uniform, we talked about this before, what I don't think a lot of people grasp is when they hang up the uniform, they're also hanging up their identity. But it takes a lot of emotional intelligence to put that together, right? And to kind of work through that, because there's work involved to kind of reinvent yourself and reinvent the next, horizon that you're going to go after, and therefore your identity is going to slightly shift somewhat. So you have to work on that. Like, identity is a finicky thing. Religion becomes part of your identity. Your family members become a component of your identity. Where you go to school, every aspect of your life becomes a component of your identity. So if you're able to kind of understand that and set it aside for a minute and work on, okay, what's the next horizon? You know, who am I really? Kind of an answer to those questions. Life gets a lot easier. You know, I had during my 4 years before getting out of the Navy, while I was at the Navy Yard, I was in and out of different offices, just asking people different questions, interviewing people, and they were interviewing me. And it was a financial advisor, worked in this high-end DC office. And I sat down with him. He was nice enough to have me up to his office, and we're chatting like this. And he said something to me I'll never forget. He was like, "Look, the best way to kind of table your transition here is you have to answer these 5 questions, right? There's really 3 questions. What do you really, really love to do? And what do you hate to do, right? What are you really good at? And what do you suck at? And then what kind of people do you want to be surrounded by?" Those 5 questions. And they're not questions that you can just like answer right away. You have to sit and reflect with them and kind of let them stew to formulate the answers. But once you do, it helps you vector which direction you should go if you truthfully answer the questions.
And that self-evaluation is something that you should be doing on regular intervals in your life.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think where I'm going with this is that takes me back to my question of what centers you. While you were in the teams, while you were in the Navy, were you already kind of looking at yourself of who am I outside of this uniform? Was that always a component of yours?
I don't know.
And I asked that because you said you really never had any mentors.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you were one who didn't just get in your rut. Hey, I'm a SEAL, so just wake me up in 30 years and I'll sign my retirement papers.
No. I always had an individuality, right, that I maintained, that I held on to, right? There was a certain part of me that wasn't going to succumb to the full, I'm not 100% SEAL, right? I'm a SEAL, but I also, here's an example. Like when we go out, I was drinking wine at a very young age, right? Go out with a bunch of team guys. They're doing shots. What do? I grab a glass of Cabernet, right? I would get a ration of shit for it all the time. And I would just tell people to go fuck themselves, right? Like, this is what I like to drink, right? So that's a small example, right? I was willing to do something different because I liked it, right? Regardless of what everybody else thought about it or said about it, right? I didn't care. So,
do you remember where you got introduced to wine?
What's that?
Do you remember where you got introduced to wine and found that you liked it?
I think, probably when I first got in the Navy, I think. I was, saw someone that ordered it. I was like, I'm going to try that, right? I'm always willing to try new shit.
I only ask because I enjoy wine also. I'm always interested in the story.
You're living in the best place for it.
For Southern California's wine region, it's definitely losing its redheaded stepchild status.
Yeah,
they're producing some good wines.
Oh, I know.
If you talk to a lot of the winemakers in the area, they'll tell you we're a young wine region. Mm-hmm. This is not something you put in your wine fridge and celebrate your 50th wedding anniversary with.
Yeah. It's not a Bordeaux.
5 to 7 years, let it age a little bit, but don't hold it for a long time. But they're definitely making some good wines in the valley.
Yeah.
The finishing up then. From your experience going corporate, coming out, going the corporate route, and then ultimately drifting back towards, I'm assuming it's a government contract position, correct?
I'm a federal employee, not contract.
What advice do you have for somebody who's coming out of the military as far as your experience playing on the corporate side and your experience coming back to the federal side? So
I'll tell you this. There's a guy that goes to my gym. And team guy, I was surprised, not a lot. I go to Lifetime Fitness in La Jolla. So it was interesting to see, another team guy here, huh? So we were talking, he's talking about getting out of the Navy. He's got 9 or 10 years, maybe even more. And every time I talk to somebody like that, I'm like, dude, don't get out, right? Because a lot of people, and I was there, right? I wanted to get out at various times, but what I say to him and everybody else that I talk to in these situations is, I would not get out, right? You're sitting on a gold mine, right? Finish out your 20 plus, get get whatever you can out of that. Then you have retirement and, medical coverage covered for life. And then you could still go pursue whatever that cool thing is you want to do. I mean, and I say, like, I did it. I was 45. I went to Goldman Sachs, right? Like I had people telling me there's no way you're going to get your foot in the door at Goldman at that age. But I did, right? So I tell everybody else, like, don't walk away. Even, I get that you're like on the, on a downside of your career, but there's, does this. Go to DLI. You'll have a lot of fun, right? You have that ability to call your detailer and say, hey, I want to go to DLI, or, this command or this command. Like there's so many opportunities, but people just don't see them because they don't hear about them or nobody's talking to them about them. So at the end of the day, I had a long-winded conversation with this guy, and just recently I saw him back in the gym. He was like, hey, man, I took on what you said, and I re-enlisted, right? Because I think he made a lot of sense, right? So that's what I would say is, don't be in a hurry to make the transition, right? That's what a lot of people are, in a hurry to make that transition. Give yourself time to, get what you want out of the Navy experience, and then, figure out what you want to do, and then kind of work your way into that, right? Don't make rash decisions.
Do you think from your experience, I don't want to say the majority, a lot of the men and women that you experienced, or maybe even yourself, when you get to those markers where it's time to re-enlist, unfortunately, you make your decision more knee-jerk of, I'm just tired of my current situation.
A lot of people do that.
Instead of thinking about the long term?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of people do that. I've known a lot of people to do that. And what they end up doing is they come right back in the Navy, right? They 6 months later, they're like, yeah, I want to come back. Because they made a rash decision.
I cut you off way back in the beginning. You were telling the story of basically kind of getting sent to diver training, I believe it was, kind of as a purgatory punishment. But you said that there was a pivotal learning point for you. Is there a piece that you want to make sure gets hit with that story?
Well, just the fact that I didn't know I was having a good day when I got shit canned for my previous platoon, right? So I had to go to the dive department, and I was like a dive tech, right? So I worked on the oxygen systems, and then ended up having an amazing, second half at SEAL Team 2 of that portion of my career. So, and had I not gotten shit canned from the previous platoon, I don't know how that would have turned out, differently.
With the progression of the Navy and the teams today, that same incident that got you in trouble, what would have happened today?
Well, it wouldn't have happened.
Oh.
Yeah.
By your choice, or by just not what's the culture?
I wouldn't have been in that situation, right? I was out drinking with my buddy, and we got in a fight, and the cops got involved. So that doesn't happen today. So it's just a matter of maturity.
Do you think the teams have matured, or just people are different today?
No. I think the teams were matured in the 90s, right? I think they've, organizationally, they've done a lot of things right. Like back in the 90s, we didn't have half the equipment we have today, but the team dynamic was completely different and better, right? Now they have all the equipment, but the team dynamic is not what it used to be. And I would say for the worst. So, but I mean, they're well trained, right? Like they're the top. I mean, they're the most trained. The SEAL teams are the most trained operators in the U.S. military by far, before they even hit the ground overseas. You're talking 2.5, 3 years of intense training before they set foot on the battle space. No other unit has that.
One last question, we'll shut it down.
Yep.
You went to SDV. I've only heard limited stories of. What was the longest trip you took in one while you were the commander there?
You mean in the SDV? It was an 8-hour boat ride.
What is that like?
That sucks. Yeah. And the worst is, like, you know, you get 4 dudes in the back of it, right? It's all dark. Right? You shut the canopy doors and it's just dark, and you're in there like this. And interestingly enough, you fall asleep on O2 or air, whatever you're breathing, because you'll switch rigs. You'll go from, you know, scuba to pure O2 to mixed gas, all in one dive profile. But yeah, you'll fall asleep in the back on the way out. But you're also in a dry suit because you're in cold water. So one time on one of those 8-hour legs, I start feeling like this really cold little dot on my leg. I'm like, fuck, I've got a leak. So, and you got a bunch of shit underneath too, but yeah, I had a small little leak and I could feel it. And I was like, man, I've got 8 hours of this.
I just think, and this from just obviously a rhetorical question, but man, after 8 hours of being confined in that, how long does it take to like stretch and, all right, let's go mobile.
Yeah.
Let's be
once
operational.
you get to your objective area, then you open the canopies, you
still
get
gotta
out,
swim.
now you're swimming, right? So you get all the stretching you need, trust me.
Well, I definitely appreciate your time. Appreciate you sharing your story.
Yeah.
All the best going forward.
Thanks.
As always, thank you for listening or watching the episode. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out on social media or send me an email. The links are all in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you're not already, please follow the podcast on whatever platform you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe on YouTube. And if you would, please leave me a rating. Ratings do 2 things. You can tell me what I need to fix or improve, and the more ratings also gets the podcast recommended to more people. Another ask, please share the podcast with anyone you think could benefit from and enjoy it. And last, don't forget, sign up for the newsletter.